Welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Hello. Imagine the shock that should befall me on this beautiful, marvelous Monday, although I've been told it's not beautiful everywhere. It's apparently raining very heavily in some places. It's not raining heavily here. Imagine the shock that I felt when I got in here at 2:13 p.m. Eastern time. And I was like, look at me, I'm 2 minutes early for the show. Only to realize that I accidentally set the time for 2 o'clock instead of 2:15. Whoopsie-daisy. Sorry. You can have at me in the comments. I guess I've earned this. It's okay. You can just, I put the comments. They're right over here. They're by the little Berlin plate and by Bucky. You can just let me have it. It's okay. It's okay. I'm not going to cry too much. It's going to be okay. I'm just going to tell myself it's going to be okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. I messed up. Okay, but I do have good news. I understand that sometimes it's frustrating when somebody says they're going to be on time and then they're not. I get it. I do. Although for many of you, you kind of know that sometimes you have to expect that with me. However, I will point out, things have gotten very interesting in Philadelphia and in Philadelphia sports. And if you pay attention, if you were sitting around in the lobby on YouTube or Facebook or X and you were like, I wonder what the point of today's show is. What's Russ going to talk about? Is he going to talk about the Flyers' horrible connection, the terrible upload speeds down at the Flyers training center this weekend? Would Russ talk about? Maybe. But I have some observations from development camp, which, in fairness, I wasn't down there observing many days. I watched the morning session, or most of it, on Saturday. Because on Saturday, I think I told you guys, we were down there to go do some interviews that you'll find over on the Snow the Goalie channel over the next few weeks, including Jack Nesbitt, Porter Martone, Carson Bjarnason, Oliver Bonk, and Alex Bump. And I have to tell you that after being down there, I am all of a sudden filled with a lot of positivity around the team. And we're going to get to that today. We are going to certainly get into why all of a sudden a guy who's typically, well, we're not going to say negative, but tends to be realistic about the expectations around the team, why all of a sudden I'm feeling significantly better about it than I have in recent years. And in fairness, this isn't contrived. This isn't bought and paid for. This is honest feedback on why I think the Flyers are in a much better chance to do some good things here. I've been saying now for about a year or so that I thought the Flyers would definitely make the playoffs in 25-26. If you were here with me for the free agent special, if you were here for me to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Russ Joy Show last week, you'll know that I'm feeling a little bit less bullish on it, but I'll still stand by it. We just have to hope that Vladar and Erson can remain healthy and not play like Garbaggio, and then I'll feel pretty good about their ability as a tandem. And if their goaltending is at least better than it was with Kolosov and Fedotov, then guess what? You're in good shape. So we're going to get to the Flyers. We're certainly going to get to some of the big takeaways with Nesbitt, with Martone, with Bump especially. We will get there. We'll also have to talk about the Phillies, who won 2 out of 3 this weekend, who seem very much to be back in the mix. But Bryce Harper, who I've had concerns about, and you guys know I've had concerns about going back to last year, just doesn't look right. And it's starting to become an actual issue. And I saw some people over on Philly Sports Talk Radio today starting to air out the concerns about Bryce Harper. They're a little bit late to the game, but it's okay. I mean, better to get to the location, better to get to the place, even if it is incredibly late. That's why you come here. I tend to be at the forefront of some of these things. So we'll talk about Bryce Harper. We certainly have to talk about Zack Wheeler and his near-perfect game, one that has pretty much 100% solidified my take on Zack Wheeler as a Philadelphia Phillies starter. We're going to get there as well. But we need to start with the news of the day. The news of the day is, in fact, related to the Philadelphia Flyers. The news of the day is a contract that I honestly, even hours after it came out, I'm still a little bit like, Danny Briere getting more good business done. Most notably, that Cam York has re-signed with the Philadelphia Flyers. He was a restricted free agent. They chose not to go to arbitration. There was no arbitration filed for by the player on Saturday, nor, I believe, by the team on Sunday. But we'll throw it out here really quick just to the official confirmation. But the Flyers did put out on Twitter, Cam York extended 5 years with an AAV of $5.15 million, which is a $25.75 million contract over the life of the contract. And so we have to break this down a little bit, right? Because on one hand, I've been a pretty outspoken critic of this belief that like Cam York is going to somehow blossom into like a top pair defenseman. Like, I don't see it. I could certainly see him being a second pair defenseman, and that's not a bad thing. You need second pair defensemen in this league. It's kind of important. Now, there were some analytics folks who last year felt very, very good about Cam York. There were a lot of eye test people who felt like he wasn't nearly as impactful as the analytic people thought he was. Okay, so we could try to find a little bit of middle ground. There were some murmurs going around at the end of last season that York might be looking for upwards of $7 million a season, maybe 7.5. At which point I said, well, then you need to trade him. And if Bo Byram was unsigned, maybe you float the idea of a one-for-one restricted free agent, swap, and then maybe you sign Byram. The Flyers very clearly didn't do that. I don't think that at this point, given the cap where it is, I don't see the Flyers getting in the restricted free agent market unless something's really going to change here. And they're going to put like Ellis on LTIR, which they've been very apprehensive about doing under Briere. So, okay. York is re-signed at $5.15 million per season for 5 years. Now, what I thought was the most likely thing to happen with Cam York was that the Flyers would sign him to a 2, maybe 3-year bridge deal, right? At what was going to be a higher AAV than I certainly would have advised, maybe like close to $6 million, maybe 6.5 if you were really going to like have to hold down your vomit. And so a 3-year deal at a $6.5 million AAV, I would have said is questionable business, but I would understand why the Flyers would want to re-up one of their own guys, and you go from there. The fact that Briere was able to somehow get York here on a $5.15 million AAV for not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 years is especially noteworthy for a few reasons. We know that the cap is going up. Next year, the year after, it's going to go gangbusters. There's a potential that 3-4 seasons from now, the cap is going to go to like unprecedented heights, right? Like in a way that there's going to be such a jump that every team is going to have boku bucks to just splash around. So York is now cost controlled for 5 years. And the reason that I bring that up and the reason that I think it's especially notable is Kevin Kurtz put out this morning. Flyers confirmed there's no kind of a no trade, no movement clause in the contract unless something is broken here in the last hour and I missed it, right? So you don't have a no movement clause to work around. You don't have a no trade clause to work around. He's in here as a second pair defenseman at just over $5 million a season for 5 years, which means that as the cap goes up for the next few years, his cap percentage of the cap that his contract counts against the cap is going to continue to go down. That's going to be the truth for any player that they sign, which means that like in 2 years, $5.15 million for a second pair defenseman is going to look like a steal, assuming he's an even passable second pair defenseman. If he's better than that, it's certainly a steal. If he somehow works his way to being a top pair defenseman, which I don't think will happen, but who the hell knows? If he ends up on the top pair, then at $5.15 million, it's an absolute steal. But there's another element to this, and this is why I think the 5 years is critical. Now, all of a sudden, if Cam York doesn't work out as a Flyer, if Cam York doesn't work out under Rick Tocchet in a similar way to how Cam York wasn't really working out under John Tortorella, you have a cost-controlled asset for the next 5 years at just over $5 million. All of a sudden, that is a very, very, very tradable contract. Now, you don't want to think about that when you sign a guy, right? Like, when it's a guy that you chose to draft, remember, they traded down twice. They passed on Cole Caulfield twice. Got a very good goal scorer. They passed on that guy twice to get Cam York. They have invested in this guy. They've invested in his development. They clearly believe that Cam York is going to be a guy that they're going to be able to build around on the blue line. If they're being fair, I think they all recognize in the front office that this team as currently constructed does not have a number one defenseman, like a true stud, build your team around Stanley Cup contender for an extended period of time. They don't have that guy. They don't have a Pronger or a Pietrangelo. Or I'd even argue that Timonen some years did feel like a real number one defenseman. You don't have that here. You don't have that at the NHL level. You don't have that in the system right now. Even like Amico, who they drafted, who's like 6'6". If the skating is solid and he fills out on a 6'6" frame, most people who have a positive view of Amico say, if he can become a second pair defenseman for you, feel pretty good about it. They don't have a number one bona fide stud in the system. And so what does that mean? Is the sky falling? No. Are you hampering your ability to do anything of value down the line? No. Because you have to keep in mind, this team, no matter what was going to happen, they were eventually going to spend some money on the blue line. And if we go back, and I'm going to see if I can pull the graph here without my computer having a full-on meltdown, we reached near critical mass earlier today, and I'm slightly worried about trying to use my computer for anything of value at this point. It's legitimately becoming a little bit scary with this computer. You used to have enough memory that it functioned very well, and I feel like in the last few weeks it's not doing what it's supposed to. But I digress. The Flyers are going to spend money on the blue line. It's just a matter of when and on whom. And if you think about this like from a standpoint of like year over year, you have Travis Sanheim locked in. You have Jamie Drysdale under contract. Now you have York under contract. You have Emile Andre, who's not going to cost you a lot of money. And then you have a third pair. We go, all right, what are we going to do? And at some point, you hope that one of the younger guys is going to be able to make their way up here. Why can't I literally just want, there we go. I got it. We're good. I should be able to pull this up. I miss the days of Cap Friendly, and I still curse the Washington Capitals for buying up Cap Friendly and ruining my life. Let's see if we can throw this on the screen without the computer having a full-on meltdown, okay? Let's take a look at like the multi-year projection from Spotrac of what the Flyers actually have under contract. Pull it up here. So here you go. Here's your blue line. You've got Sanheim under contract into the 2030s, right? You have Ryan Ellis, who thankfully is eventually going to come off your books, 27, 28. Again, they could use LTIR. They tend to prefer keeping him on the cap. They can accrue some cap savings into the season that could maybe be beneficial to you along the trade deadline and then put him on LTIR. You have Rasmus Ristolainen under contract for this season and next season, and I would assume that by then, good chance he is moved if they can find another big body. You have Nick Seeler under contract for 3 more seasons at $2.7 million. You have Drysdale, who I mentioned before. You have his RFA rights. Same thing with Zamula. Same thing with Andre. Emile Andre's not going to get some kind of massive, like $5 million per year contract, right? When he's an RFA at age 24. So that's not something to worry too much about. Zamula is probably going to be like, what, a 7D for you? Maybe, if you retain him beyond this season. You have his RFA rights. They brought in Juleson and Gilbert to kind of battle for that number 7 defenseman spot, unless Risto's going to miss the start of the season, which it sounds like there's a good chance he will. One of those guys will be in the lineup. So if you take a look at that, an aggregate, right? Going beyond this season, the only guys of value who are really signed here long-term were Sanheim, Risto, sort of, and Seeler. And now, again, the Cam York thing isn't factored in here because I think they still have him listed down here somewhere in the RFA thing. But $5.15 million for the next 5 years. When you compare that to what some of these other guys are making, he's making a little bit more than Rasmus Ristolainen. Is that fair? I'd say based on age, based on upside, you would certainly hope so. Should he be making less than Travis Sanheim? He should, so that tracks. It's not a bad deal. It's not. Even for somebody like me, who spent all last season wondering, what's the point? Like, York isn't a super small defenseman, but he's by no means a big banger. He's not a big body. He's not a Risto. He's not even really a Sanheim. He's a relatively built, what is he, 6'1", 6'2"? He's not a huge body. He's a good defenseman. He's fine. You want to believe that there's a little bit more offensive upside to his game than with some of the other guys. Fine. But they got him here on a nice term at a nice AAV, and you feel like, all right, all things considered, it could have been a lot worse. Because if you had gotten York signed here at like $6.5 million for 3 years, you'd be banging your head against a wall that you overspent on AAV. you'd be banging your head against the wall in case he actually gets significantly better over the next season or two, because then that would mean that when the contract's up in 3 years, you'd be looking at a significant increase. Now you have him at what I would consider to be a relatively good cost-controlled second defenseman salary for the next 5 years. It's all good. Hard to argue, even if you're not a big Cam York believer. Just over $5 million for a guy that you can pretty much guarantee is going to be a top 4 defenseman. Some nights he might be on the top pair. Some nights he might be on the second pair. $5.15 million isn't anything to lose your mind about. Now, there's that. So the York of it all has been covered. I'll go out to the comments here. I want to see how people are feeling about it. Then we're going to talk about some of the stuff that happened this weekend with Dev Camp. But we'll get there in a little bit. Let's see. I like this by Linda Joseph. Russ is a podcast mogul. Being late is part of the allure. I do appreciate that. It's very sweet. Zackos here says, oh, yes. Let's see. I did see a bunch. What is this? Joe Papel calling me Mad Dog Russo Joy. Mad Dog Russo Joy. I could handle that, I guess. Poonugs 39. I don't remember seeing Poonugs before, but Poonugs 39. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe and ring the little bell. We just got flashing lights in here. If the stream goes down, I don't know what we're going to do. So we're going to try to get the show in before. That was a lot of lightning. I don't like that. Poonugs 39. Thank you for being here. Like the video, share the video, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notified whenever we go live with an episode. Okay. Thank you. Hexram asks, do you think it's a bad look for Flyers giving a contract to York after Torts situation, regardless of opinion on Torts? No, because this comes back to whatever it was, and I've heard a few things, but yeah, I'm not reporting them, right? The York and Torts of it all, what that final confrontation was, the thing that essentially booked towards his unemployment, right? I actually kind of like the idea that a player maybe was pissed off about being benched and that it put his team in a really bad spot, that they're now rolling out fewer defensemen than they should, and that in these games that you're actively trying to win for whatever reason, you are actively hurting your team's ability to do so. I'm fine with a player advocating on behalf of his teammates. I think it's totally fine. I'm fine with a guy advocating on behalf of himself. I don't think it's a bad look for the Flyers. The only bad look for the Flyers here, I think, is if you fire Torts, then you get to the offseason and you trade him and don't get anything of value back, right? If the Flyers had traded Cam York for a second-round pick, you'd be like, well, that's telling you that the guy was toxic and the league was really down on him. I think that this, all things considered, I would expect that the Flyers took calls on Cam York, maybe weren't actively shopping him, but were certainly open to the idea that if somebody wanted to, blow them out of the water, they would have the conversation. I would expect that that was part of the calculus of it, and I would assume that you get enough teams involved and they're not offering you quite what you expect, get the player on a longer-term deal at an affordable cap hit, and guess what? The trade deadline this year, next offseason, the next trade deadline, the next offseason, you're still going to have interested suitors, and the guy's now locked up. He's not a pending RFA. So I don't think it's a bad look. I don't know how it could be. Jay Grebby says, good afternoon, Russell and Russettes. Not able to listen at the moment. Boy is in recovery room from tonsil surgery. All the best to your boy there, Jay. Hope everything goes well. Says, when we listen back in a couple of days, can you give Nolan a shout out? It'd make his day. Nolan, good job getting those tonsils out. Tonsils are awful. I had my tonsils out when I was really little. Tonsils and adenoids. I don't actually remember which part of it was a thing that I remembered and which part of it I imagined. I seem to remember this idea of waking up in a recovery room. I won't go into details. I just remember it being a very I don't know if it was a dream or not. But Nolan, good on you. Get those tonsils out. You don't need them. You don't need tonsils. Who needs tonsils? Who wants their tonsils? You can let me know in the comments. If any of you out there still have your tonsils and you're thrilled about it, you could, I guess, shame this child, Nolan, that he had to have his tonsils out, and shame me because I don't have tonsils. If you're a tonsil enthusiast, you can leave it in the comments. If you now identify as tonsilless, like myself and young Nolan, you can also offer your words of encouragement in the live chat, and then Jay can go back in a few days and show all the nice, supportive comments in the comment sections about getting their tonsils out. All right. Let's see. I see people talking about... Oh, here we go. Jim Grasso confirms I was there. Saw Russ on the perch above the rink on Saturday morning. Jim, why didn't you yell? You're supposed to yell. You throw a shoe at my head. You say, hey, like, remember that? The Iraqi journalist who threw the shoe at George W.? I think this is a great... Phew, phew. Could have had that from the perch. Maybe it would have been kind of funny. Let's see. Chris Freed says, Russ is feeling the kumbaya with the Flyers. Adjust your expectations accordingly. Not exactly true. We'll get there in a second. Joe Papel thinks that no matter what, the Flyers are still going to be in the bottom 10, but that's okay. Unrestricted free agents didn't move the needle, and Martone hopefully covers for the loss of Forster. We'll get there in a little bit. Poonugs39 back in here. Says, I hope we are bottom 10, but something tells me we'll be out of the playoffs and outside of a lottery ticket. I think if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to be like one of the first teams out. But they're going to do so in a way that's not going to piss you off, Poonugs. I don't want Poonugs39 to be sad. Don't be sad today. I almost want to read this like Winnie the Pooh. I know there's no H in there, but like, I hope we're bottom 10, but something tells me we'll be out of the playoffs and outside of a lottery ticket. All right, let's keep going. CMZ about York says he's a good second pair guy, nothing more. Jim Grasso says York got Torts fired and got paid. Thank goodness Ford is here. I'm glad Ford is here. Peter Tom Willis says, do you see York being a defenseman on a contender? I don't. If he's a strong enough second pair defenseman, I could see Cam York being a defenseman on a playoff team. I think you're probably best suited. Like if you're actually trying to be a Stanley Cup contender, I think you're probably better suited with Cam York being like on the strongest third pair in the league. Maybe the overall like the number 4 defenseman on the team. If he's like your second or third best defenseman, then I think you're probably right. No, that doesn't happen. Raymond Supper says, York deal is a surprise. When I checked out Lightning camp on Friday due to rain, everyone noticed how big defenseman prospects were. We were told by their development staff, big D-men are returning. Well, that's what we saw. Like the Panthers kind of changed a lot of things. The league is just like any other sports league, right? There's a pendulum that swings one way or the other. For a few years, it felt like we were kind of pivoting to a smaller league with speed and skill. And now you've seen this resurgence of the bigger-bodied player who plays a heavy style. Now that's the way the teams are going to almost overcorrect, and we'll see who works. We'll see what works. Adam Glickus says, hashtag Let's Go Flyers, hashtag Danny B the Magician, hashtag number 48. Let's see. Let's see. JH says, great deal by Danny. Catholic Nono says, York is a good D-man. He gets a bad rap because of who the Flyers could have taken in the draft. Just like Brandon Graham. How did that work out? Brandon Graham won multiple Super Bowls. We'll see if Cam York finds the same success in the NHL. I'm not sure, but maybe. Yukon456 says, my power's up. But look at this. Yukon456, in the midst of a power outage, isn't looking to fix the sump pump, isn't looking to, save everything in the freezer and the fridge. Yukon456 is toughing it out with us here, probably on a cell phone, on a mobile hotspot. Good job, Yukon456. Be more like Yukon456. Tony Louis asks, I wonder what the number would have been if York went to arbitration. I'm betting between 3 and 4.5-ish. He's really only had one good year as a pro and seriously regressed last season. It wouldn't have been that low. I really don't think it would have been that low. If it had been, the Flyers would have filed for arbitration. I think that where the Flyers were probably going to come in at is around that 4.5 number. I think York would have probably asked for 6.5, and you still would have settled around 5. So you've avoided having to get into like an ugly back and forth with the player. You negotiate it. You land on where I think you probably would have anyway. If anything, in arbitration, maybe York would have gotten slightly more. Maybe he would have gotten 5.5 instead of 5.1. Whatever. Zacho says, I can't hate the signing. York is a solid D-man, and now we can't stand to lose him right now either. Maybe movable team-friendly contract that we can trade if we end up finding a number 1 defenseman. That is correct. Let's see. Catholic Notice says, York taking a stand against Torts should give people who think he's a timid guy pause. He exposed Torts as a fraud. I loved it. Here's the thing about York. York, to me, is a guy who still allows the game to come to him instead of grabbing the game by the throat. And he's a SoCal guy, and like that just might be part of his like affect. If he can become a more aggressive player, I think his ceiling is significantly higher. I don't necessarily think that him going at Torts really changes anything. If we had seen him go after Torts on the bench, maybe it's a little bit different. I don't know. Vista Vibe 360 says, can we still unload him for Quinn Hughes? Yeah, this is going to be when Tocchet and Zegras, remember Zegras on the Snow the Goalie Draft Night show, said that he might have to do a little bit of recruiting. You just never know. You never know. All right, so, all right. AJ's here, says just rolling in, saying hi. Hope everyone has a good day. Back to work. Thanks for being here, AJ. All right. Let's see. UConn's at 30% battery. Will I make it to the end of the stream? Let's see. All right, good. All right, let's pick up. So we were just talking about York, and Greg Bondarenko asks a question. This is a good transition. Very well done, Greg. Any thoughts on Dev Camp? I have a lot of thoughts on Dev Camp. So as I mentioned, Saturday I went down because we were going to go do these interviews with Nesbitt, Martone, Bonk, Bump, and Bjarnason. A lot of B's. And I will tell you, the goal of doing any interview is to try to get something new. Like everybody asks the same question.
Porter, is it true, though, that you really do think you have a chance to make the NHL roster? Carson, what's it like to be a goalie? Oliver, I know you're not on the ice, but do you miss playing the game? Alex, was it fun to win a national championship? Cam, do you think, or Jack?
I don't know why I keep calling him Cam Nesbitt. It's Jack Nesbitt.
Jack, is being 6'5" interesting? Is the air thinner up there?
Like, there are certain questions that you can ask. And I'm not saying that we didn't ask any of those questions on the show, but like, by the time you get done watching the interviews that we did for Snow the Goalie, you will feel like you know these guys better. On the ice and off the ice. I can promise you that. You'll have a better idea of what each of them is going to be working on between now and training camp, the upcoming season, whether they're going to be back at juniors, if they're going to go to college, if they go to the Phantoms, if they end up with the Flyers. You'll have a much better holistic idea of the player. So that's cool. But I'm down there on Saturday morning, and there weren't a whole lot of things that stood out, right? Like, I was down watching the Martone group. He was on the end that I was closer at. And Martone, to me, looks like a guy who, watching him on the ice, talking to him as part of the interview, I just have this feeling that Porter Martone at this point believes he has a very realistic chance to make the Flyers at a camp. That's not arrogance. That is confidence. He did not give off the vibe that he's entitled to anything. He said pretty much the exact opposite, and he has been saying pretty much the exact opposite since getting drafted by the Flyers. But make no mistake about it, Tyson Forster's injury has opened that door. If Martone thought that there was a good chance or an outside chance he could make the Flyers out of camp, that certainly changed once Tyson Forster got hurt. It certainly ramped up when Maxim Shabanov signed with the Islanders instead of the Flyers. Now all of a sudden, Porter Martone feels like he has a legitimate path to making the team. Now, they have a lot of right wings. And in fairness, most people view Martone and his ultimate upside as being a right winger. But could there be an opening? Could there be a potential for him to play on the left wing if that's going to get him on the team? Maybe. I don't know if the Flyers are going to do a whole lot of screwing around about playing him on his off wing, but like there's a potential there. So Martone to me feels like a guy who absolutely has the hockey IQ, has the size, and could potentially bulk up a little bit more, have more of that size from Jump Street when the season starts. I think there's a very good chance that you see Porter Martone on the Flyers on opening night. Keep in mind, he is in a very weird place because my understanding now is for him to participate at training camp, he will very likely have to sign that ELC. As soon as he signs the ELC, he is no longer college eligible, which means if you're a Penn State fan who is convinced that he's going to go to Penn State, your dream will end. if you are a fan of another college program, and by the way, I'm not convinced that like it's Penn State or bust. There are other teams that are certainly interested in him. If you're a college program and you're looking at trying to woo Porter Martone, right now his sights are set on the NHL. There's no doubt about it. He also has to get a feeling from the organization if it's realistic or not, because you can't sign that ELC, get rid of your college eligibility, and then like be here for a week of camp and be told, you know what? Never mind. Because then what? What's your next option? You're going to go play junior? I guess. He's going to be too young to play in the AHL. There's a provision in the upcoming CBA that would affect next year where a first-round pick could be under the requisite age to actually go play in the AHL. You get it for one first-round pick. And in theory, Martone could have been that guy if this had been happening next season instead of this season. But there are enough complicating factors right now that, like, if you're the Flyers and you're looking at the depth chart and you're looking at the fact that Forster's out, Shabanov chose to sign elsewhere, then all of a sudden you go, are we rushing the kid? Is Martone going to have his development stymied by being brought up too early? And there is legitimately like some validity to that argument. He's a young guy. He's still a young prospect. He wouldn't be AHL eligible. So it's college, or I guess juniors, or he goes to play in the NHL. I think he is ultimately going to make a hell of a case. I fully expect him to not go to college. I fully expect that he's going to try to sign that ELC and do everything in his power to make the team. That's what I think. I could be wrong. He could talk to the Flyers over the next month or so, and they say, listen, as much as we would love to see you compete for a spot, we don't want you to sign that ELC and lose out on the opportunity to go try to pursue a national championship and develop at the collegiate level. I don't know if they'll do that, but they could have that conversation. So if it were me, if I were a Penn State fan and I were preparing to get a Porter Martone college sweater, would I do that? I don't know. You certainly can. If I were a Michigan State or a Western Michigan or somebody else and I were going to get a Martone stitch jersey, would I do that? I don't know. Maybe. If I were a Flyers fan and I were thinking about getting a Porter Martone sweater, custom made right now, would I do it? I don't know. Maybe. I think that there are a lot of different things in play for the kid. But ultimately, I think he wants to play for the Flyers. And I'm pretty convinced he's going to make a very compelling case to be on the opening night roster. And he said it himself. We threw to it on an episode last week. He fully expects to try to make... He expects that he's going to have a chance to make the team. So go from there. I like the younger players coming in and having that high expectation set. And that's Martone. I'll take you to another guy who I think is going to make a legitimate case at making the roster. It's Alex Bump. Because we got to talk to Alex Bump as well. That interview will be coming in the next few weeks. Bump, to me, physically looks like he's ready to play in the NHL. Mentally, I think he is very committed to playing in the NHL. And I think that he saw the Forster injury. I think he saw that Shabanov didn't sign here. And he felt like, man, if I were mentally in the place where I felt like I could make this team, that confidence went up. Bump looked like he was playing on another level. I mean, you can go back and follow everyone who was at camp the entire week, who had the same impression. I talked to Charlie O'Connor on Saturday morning because Charlie put out that Bump was the best player in his group, not in all of camp, in his group. And his group had a bunch of guys in it, a lot of them who were like not the best prospects. And some dope with very low media literacy saw that, was like, oh, so you're saying he looks better than Porter Martone? No, they weren't in the same group. But like, you talk to people who were down at Dev Camp, Bump is a guy who stood out the entire week. And I think there's reason to believe he's got a legitimate chance to make the lineup as well. I floated out this idea on Twitter last week of three players, Bump, Martone, and Luchenko. Which of those players do you think is most likely to make the team? How many of them do you think are most likely to make the team? I don't think they're going to go 0 for 3. I would fully expect that at least one of Martone, Bump, and Luchenko are on the team. I think right now, if you ask me to put money on it, I'd say 2 out of the 3. I think Martone is going to make a push. He could be on the team. Bump, I think, will be on the team. And then it comes down to Lutsenko. Like, I think Martone would make it before Lutsenko. I really do think that they must organizationally kind of accept the fact that Lutsenko might not be ready yet, and he plays center. Now, if he has to go back to Guelph, how much better is he going to get? That is a concern. But I'm not convinced right now that Lutsenko is going to be a guy who's going to be able to step right onto the ice and be an NHL player for the entire season next year, which could be a problem. I'd say right now Martone and Bump have like a little bit of an inside track. Lutsenko's not like out of the running, but it's interesting. Another guy who is interesting in camp, I keep saying camp, Jack Nesbitt, 6'5" center, making plays happen all week. They play in the scrimmage that almost nobody could see unless you were actually in person. And Nesbitt has 2 goals. And you start to see the flashes. Now, I will tell you, without spoiling the entirety of the interview, I asked Nesbitt about like the thing that he needs to work on the most. And he said that he is going to be working with a skating coach this entire offseason. And that to him, the most important thing is getting those first 3 strides or so quicker. He said it makes all the difference. It's the difference between an odd man rush and not being able to get out of your zone. So to me, I love the fact that like Nesbitt acknowledges his weak spot is his skating, but I'll tell you that from the bit that I've seen, the bit that I got to watch through clips on social, what I got to see through a potato cam at the Flyers training center on Sunday, you can fix a guy's skating. You can't teach size. And if he's going to play heavy, and if he's going to cause chaos, and if he's going to grow into that frame, I think the Flyers are ultimately going to have a hell of a gem in that draft in Nesbitt to go along with a guy who, again, I think is going to have a really good chance of making the opening night roster in Martone. This could be one of those drafts that you look back on and say, holy shit, they got both of those guys? How did they do that? That could be like the hallmark moment of the Danny Bree era. All right, so that's what I saw at Dev Camp. Now, let's see. We'll go over to UConn. Martone was working on parts of his game in Dev Camp. He wasn't showing off his game to make the team. The coaches he wasn't showing off his game to make the team. The coaches definitely gave him specific things to work on and said, don't worry if you look not good. I saw him taking rushes from the left wing, right? Like there were a couple of times that I think even the Flyers put out something of him with Leclerc on the left wing. It was interesting. Let's see. Christopher O'Donnell says, I would love it if Martone went to college to play with McKenna. Then we'd win the lottery in 26 and win a cup in 3 years. What would actually be really funny is like, all right, so let's say Martone and McKenna play together at Penn State. And then next year, things don't go well for the Flyers, but they end up with like the number 4 pick instead of the number 1 pick. And then Martone goes, yo, Gavin, maybe you tell those first 3 teams you don't want to play there. You want to go to Philadelphia, huh? It ain't going to happen. It's not happening. Get the Gavin McKenna of it all out of your heads, guys. Get it out of your heads. Greg Bondarenko says, any potential surprises with the rookies, surprising standouts? No, from what I saw. And again, it was limited to Saturday morning. I'm not going to go off of everybody's like social media clips from the week. There's not anybody that I like was blown away by, or anybody that like I've had like blowing up my phone saying, this guy looked like a bona fide stud. Where the hell did he come from? Bump wasn't a first round pick. Bump was a later round pick. And so like anything that he's going to bring to the table is going to feel like an overall value add and higher than expectations. Oh, we just got bad thunder. I'm worried. Adam Glikas says, I love it. It shows he wants to bring his talent to the team. I think he was talking about Martone, but I would say this applies to a lot of guys. Tony Louis says, Couturier, Justin Williams, Pickinen, Nolan Patrick, and others made the jump to full-time NHLers in their draft season. Martone is arguably a better prospect than any of those guys were. It was funny. I saw a quote from Leclerc where Leclerc said that, Martone has a better shot than he even did. That's pretty high praise. It's really high praise. Zach O says, I really hope this is our Dallas 2017 draft class. We're due for good luck like that, and this draft feels special. It'd be really cool. Adam says, I wanted to be there, but bad pain limits me. I hate it. Can't be around my team. # don't ever F up your spine. Hope your back feels better, Adam. Okay. So we talked about Dev Camp. We talked about Cam York. Can we take a moment here to, as a collective group on YouTube, Facebook, and X, can we all take a second to just appreciate Zack Wheeler? I know that we all understand Zack Wheeler's an incredible pitcher. I know that we all can acknowledge the fact that, yes, Zack Wheeler, along with Kyle Schwarber, the only two Philadelphia Phillies to make the All-Star game. All right, great. Zack Wheeler, I was thinking about it last week. I think I started to float this idea out there, and I've seen other people floating it, so this is by no means a Russ Joy exclusive or a Rustradamus thing. I thought back about all of the great pitchers that I have watched, not just for the Phillies, but in all of Major League Baseball over the last few decades. And then I did kind of hone back in on the Phillies. And I thought to myself, have we seen a more impactful starting pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies over an extended period of time than Zack Wheeler? Now, you're not going to get me to go back to Carlton and Roberts and Grover Cleveland Alexander. Like, I'm not going back there, guys. Way before my time. And I'm not even going to try to go back to, like, the early days of Schilling as a Philly. Like, not going there either. I'll go back to, like, the heyday. I will go back to the pinnacle of Phillies fandom. And that was the 08 through 2011, 2012 teams. Those were the teams where we got to see Cole Hamels become ace quality. We got to see the Phillies go out and get Cliff Lee, who pitched like a demigod, right? In the 09 postseason, going to a World Series, nonchalantly grabbing the ball out of the air. We got to see some great Cliff Lee years as a Philly. We got to see the Phillies bring in a Cy Young winner in Roy Halladay, who was by far the best pitcher in Major League Baseball at the time. We got to watch him throw a perfect game against the Marlins. We got to watch him throw a no-hitter in the playoffs against the Reds. I never thought in my life I would see another pitcher as dominant as Roy Halladay. I thought it would actually, the mere notion of having a pitcher wearing a Phillies uniform being better than Roy Halladay would have been like sacrilege to say, and yet, Zack Wheeler is the best starting pitcher I have ever watched in a Phillies uniform. At least like since I've been able to understand what sports are. So I'm not going to like include like when I was a wee little lad. Wheeler is the most dominant pitcher. He is the best Phillies starting pitcher to put on the red pinstripes. He is pitching right now at a level that very few ever have. And I don't just mean Phillies history. I mean overall. I mean in decades across Major League Baseball. He has been nothing short of incredible. And he's doing it for a team that continues to have a very up and down lineup, one that has largely underwhelmed. And he's done it for a team that has had World Series expectations from the moment he got here until even now. Now, we might disagree about how realistic the Phillies' opportunity is going to be to make a World Series, to win a World Series this season. But he's doing it as the ace of the staff. Remember, he supplanted a guy who had been the opening day starter many years in a row in Aaron Nola. He's been able to remain the staff while guys like Ranger Suarez and Christopher Sanchez have looked otherworldly as well. And yet it still feels like there's an entirely different level that Wheeler is pitching at. You watch Sanchez and Suarez at any given time and you go, holy shit, these guys are legit number ones on a bunch of staffs in Major League Baseball. Wheeler, the gap between Wheeler and even like Suarez and Sanchez is pretty damn big. And then it's those guys. And then there are a lot of other pitchers. And then Nolan, Jesus Luzardo, and that. But let's focus on the positives. Zack Wheeler's been incredible. And I very, very, very rarely find myself pulling for a player to win a player award, right? I was pretty outspoken about wanting to see Saquon Barkley get to break the rushing record and maybe winning league MVP. But in the case of Zack Wheeler, I want this guy to win a Cy Young. I almost lost power. We might lose the show here pretty soon. I don't know if I've ever wanted to see a player win a Cy Young the same way that I want to see Zack Wheeler win one. And I think part of what's doing it now is knowing that we have Wheeler for a very finite period. He's now reiterated that when this contract runs out, that's the end for Zack Wheeler as a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. So when you start to see that horizon, like when you start to see the sun setting in the distance and you realize there's only so much road left, and you see a guy who's pitching at this level, You want to see him win that award. Do I want the Phillies to win the World Series? Of course. Do I want them to win that more than to see Zack Wheeler win Cy Young? Yes. But given that I'm not exactly bullish on the Phillies winning the World Series, I would certainly take Zack Wheeler winning a Cy Young as a consolation prize right now. Because make no mistake about it, he has not just exceeded expectations, he's blown them out of the water. He has been everything that you've ever wanted an ace to be. And unlike Halladay, who was incredible, Wheeler has done it for a much longer period of time. He will easily make the Wall of Fame. He will easily have a case to make the Hall of Fame. And by the time we all look back on this team in, like, let's say 2050, and we're talking about the best pitchers to ever play in our lifetimes, I think you're going to see a lot more people put that name Zack Wheeler ahead of guys that we thought it would almost be insane to think about in Lee and Halladay. Because of the period that he's done it as a member of the Phillies, to me, he now becomes the de facto number one that I've ever watched as a Phillies pitcher. Again, you can go back to like when I was a wee little lad or before I was born, but from let's say the early 2000s till now, oh yeah, Zack Wheeler, he's that guy. He's that guy. Reed DeFord says, big brain here, got Wheeler Cy Young at plus 1,000 in preseason. Good on you, Reed. Do I want to know how much that'll pay out? Because good on you, Reed. Good on you. Let's see. I saw some people posting here about Wheeler. Let me see if I can get to a few of them before the power goes out. Chris Freed says, unpopular opinion, Cole Hamels was only slightly better than Nola. I think he was better than that. I do. Raymond Supper says, Zack Wheeler deserves to get a World Series ring, but the Phillies need to be more consistent offensively for it to get to him. I was listening to Phightin Words this morning, which again you can find where your podcasts are, as well as on the Joy Media YouTube account. They were talking about the fact that the last 10 World Series winners, the last 10 years, the team with the best starting pitching WAR did not win the World Series. Wheeler can carry you in a playoff series. He can keep you in games. And I think along with Sanchez and Suarez, as long as they can stay healthy, it's going to be about as good of a three-headed monster as you can have in a rotation in October. But will the bats show up? And as of right now, I still don't think they will. And that's what's ultimately going to hurt them. I mean, remember, when Halladay threw that no-hitter against the Reds, we were ecstatic. But let us not forget that there was a time that Halladay was in the postseason. He gave up, was it one run in the elimination game against the Cardinals? And Chris Carpenter threw a complete game shutout. Your offense has to produce. I think Wheeler is more than deserving of getting a Cy Young. I think he's more than deserving of like getting to win a World Series. But the offense can't let him down. Joe Papel says, Halladay wasn't really here long enough and didn't get us to the World Series. Talk about missing an opportunity when Ruben didn't get it done in July 2009. Pedro Martinez was a failure backup plan. That was a shame, too. Andrew Bagley over on X says, yeah, but the inconsistency, will it be the downfall of this team? I hope not. I'm still legitimately worried about the lineup. Let's see. We'll go over to Raymond. It says Steve Carlton's 1972 season where he was 27-10 on a Phillies team that only won 58 games is unmatchable. I wasn't here in the 70s. I don't know. Carlton was incredible. I can't give you the anecdotal feeling of what it was like to watch Carlton play and now to watch Wheeler play. I can't do it. It'd be disingenuous. Let's see. Coots and Scores says Nola comes back strong. As frustrating as he is, he just finds a way to figure it out going into the end of the season. It'd be a great thing for the Phillies. If they could go into a postseason run with a white-hot Zack Wheeler, Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez, and a returning Nola who looks like a very good number two, you'd be thrilled. But again, the bats have to perform. Reed says, also got Bryce MVP at plus 1,400, but we aren't going to talk about that. Correct. Chris is right here. I know. 2010. Reds. Cards. Bad series. Not great. 2011. It was the end. It's when it all died. Zach over here says Nola is a 4. Nola might actually be a 5 if he comes back and he pitches like he did before he got hurt. I want to imagine that there's a potential scenario where he can pitch like a 2 or a 3. That would still be fine going into the postseason. Ford says, I really enjoyed Cliff Lee. That one-handed catch against the Yankees. Still feel like that Phillies team should have won that series that year. I'll never forget the Alex Rodriguez home run off of the right field camera, where there was the argument that the camera was technically over the fence and maybe that wouldn't have been a home run. I still like that. Zach asks, do you like Nola? I personally never liked him. As a human being, he seems totally fine. As a pitcher, I always thought he was overrated. And I'd always have people kind of hit me with like the back of the baseball card stats on why Nola was so good relative to other starters. And I'd keep saying, then why does it always feel like when he goes out onto the mound, I feel like we're in for a disaster class? Yes, he would have some starts where he'd go, like, if you were to analyze Nola in a vacuum, you look at his stuff, you look at the movement on his pitches, there's enough there for you to say, oh yeah, this guy should be a number one. And yet, for whatever reason, like we always used to joke about the Rav fourth inning, but like there was a mental block for this guy somewhere that would always lead to him having a bad inning. And the problem with Nola, especially in recent years, has been the long ball. It's not that hitters make contact against him and he gives up a little dink and dunk here and there. It tends to be he gives up a few homers, and that ends up being the crooked number, and the Phillies offense just doesn't figure out a way to get it done, and Nola ends up looking significantly worse. But man, I don't know, if he comes back later in the season and he's stronger, doesn't have the wear and tear of a full season, maybe we'll get a little bit of luck from the baseball gods. I don't know. Christopher O'Donnell says, I'll always love Nola because he got my dad back into the Phillies. Well, that's nice. That's a good personal anecdote. Joe Papel says, a Halladay and Lee tandem in 09 guarantees a repeat. Still angry at Ruben for missing on that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Yes, that is probably one of the best what-ifs if they had been willing to keep Cliff Lee and not try to restock the farm system with guys that never amounted to much. Greg Bondarenko says, I enjoyed the duo of Moyer and Martinez, each taking 3 to 4 innings. Maybe Phillies can do that with Nola and another pitcher. I don't know why they would, though. I love Jamie Moyer. That 08 team, there was always a part of me that was like, you see this guy who's just significantly older than everybody, and yet he goes out and there was something about the way that Moyer approached at-bats that I really enjoyed. Like, he was just out-thinking these guys who were 15, 20 years younger than him. I loved it. Okay. It just started downpouring. I'll try to get to the last point here before we head out. I am more concerned with Bryce Harper now than I was even last week. If you remember, I brought up the Bryce Harper quote, the Bryce Harper scrum in the dugout, where he said that he felt like his elbow his wrist had gotten to about as good as it was going to, and that had plateaued, and he felt like it wasn't going to get any better, so he may as well come back. He's like 3-17 since coming back into the lineup. The power's not there. The threat at the plate isn't there. And it honestly just makes me kind of wonder, like, at what point, if you're the Phillies, do you say, yeah, it's time to shut it down? Like, it's time to get surgery. We said this last week. A player ultimately has to make the call. And you better hope that there's a surgery. I think that's the actual, like, thing that's floating out there. Again, remember, last October he had the wrist injury, and then he's since said that, like, he rested it from October through December, and then it started to feel better. You better hope that there's a surgical option, because if not, if this, like, much, much, much more reduced version of Bryce Harper is going to be what you're going to get, and you're only halfway through that contract, God help the Phillies, because that deal is going to look horrific. I mean, you might feel like you got a lot of value out of him through the halfway point, through the midway point of the contract. The power has to be there. Right now, he looks lost at the plate. He looks like a guy who feels like his body is letting him down. And I hope, more than anything, that he's able to find some kind of consistency at the plate, a little bit more confidence at the plate. You don't need him to be MVP Bryce Harper, but you certainly need him to play at, like, flirting with an all-star appearance Bryce Harper. If he's worse than that, you're in deep doo-doo. This postseason run that everybody wants to see end with a World Series appearance and hopefully a World Series win will not happen if Bryce Harper looks the way that he's looked since coming back into the lineup. That should be the biggest concern to any Phillies fan. Yeah, they need bullpen help. Yeah, they need another consistent bat in the lineup, preferably one who plays in the outfield. They have a Bryce Harper sized problem, and I don't know if you notice. The guy's pretty stacked. It's a big hole in the lineup. And if he's going to come back and he's going to look how he's looked since returning from this retweaking of the wrist, it's not going to be a long postseason run. We'll check back in. If you want the more detailed breakdown of the Phillies series from over the weekend, you want some more detailed analysis, I would lead you to Phightin Words with a PH. Phightin Words, you can find it on the Joy Media YouTube channel as well as on their YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Bob Wankel, Anthony Sanfilippo did a great breakdown. That's how I spent my early morning. They were up at 7:30 in the morning doing a stream this morning. Go check out the show. In the meantime, I'll be around. I saw somebody ask a question earlier. Are we going to get Snow the Goalie every week? The beauty of doing all those interviews at Dev Camp is, the plan is going to be to do a weekly show from now through the end of the summer. And if we can't sync up our calendars, you'll at least have an interview from Dev Camp with some of the players that people are most interested in. Again, that's Martone, that's Nesbitt, Bonk, Bump, and Bjarnason. And I have to tell you, the Bjarnason interview might have been my favorite of the 5 that day. You'll have to tune into the Snow the Goalie channel to find out why. I'll be back later this week, of course, on Wednesday and on Friday with the Russ Joy Show. Until then, I want to thank everybody who joined me over on YouTube, on Facebook, and on X. Big thank you to everybody who follows after the fact, watches on YouTube after the fact, drops comments in the regular comments section after the fact, and all those of you who listen in the podcast feed. I know it's more skewed to the video audience, but there are a lot of people who do listen to this show in the podcast feed. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. So do me a favor, if you haven't done so already, like the video, share the video, subscribe. If you're on a podcast app, leave a 5-star rating, a 5-star review. I'll read it on the show. Until Wednesday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart. That's also the name of the show. Talk to each and every one of you on a wonderful Wednesday. Until then, have a marvelous Monday. Bye now.